Okay, so week 5, the first item of the week is the JavaScript, the weird parts. So what I'm going to have you do before you, and you could do it after, but as long as you do it, I'm going to have you do two things in addition to this work. And I'll go over this work in a second. But one thing is I'm going to have you implement some kind of design into your root index file. And then I want you to create a new file called mynotes.md. md.md is indicates file extension for it's not necessarily a file format. It's basically the same file format as an HTML file, but it's a markdown. So if you haven't heard of markdown, you definitely want to go check out, and it's fairly easy. Markdown, so we talk about HTML as markup, right? So you're basically marking down in very minimum and not even tags, and I'll show you mine. But you can see, like, here's a markdown cheat sheet, right? So how to do headings, how to do emphasis. So I'll show you mine. So here's what I want from here on out, because here's why I'm getting a little concerned, is that I'm creating this content and it seems like there's been a little kind of holes that fall through. That's normal, because sometimes it's like I don't need to watch the whole thing. So and just to ensure that, so what I want you to do in your root directory for your repo is to create a design, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I want you to create mynotes.md for Markdown. And so this is actually the one I did over the summer, and I used the Markdown file to keep notes as I was working through the content. Okay, so what I want you to do is we'll start in week 5 here. Okay, so you can do week 5, and then the first one, right, would be just what I said, which is that, starting today, I'll have, depending on what we're doing that day, some items for you to add to your Markdown file, okay, or your notes Markdown file. Okay, so on the index file, I played around because I told you last time, if you remember, that I wanted to implement, just to play with CSS grid. So I did. It was really fairly straightforward. I found some inspiration out there, and I like the idea of the way the grid, and it's, so you can do a little research if you want. Again, this is not an HTML and CSS course, but I think understanding grid and Flexbox are both beneficial and have some overlap, but some individual use cases, and I like this. So I want you to find something. You don't have to use grid. I would say grid or Flexbox would be good, okay, for this. And then what I'm going to have you do as we move forward is implement this at least into the items, like in here, right, where I have a link to the lectures. Then I'd want some kind of design that follows this. Like, as an example for me, when I click into, and this is the next upgrade I will do, is I click into one of the items that doesn't have its own design. As an example, under the, for me, the kitty match or the autogram, is that, those things have their own design, right, that you've created. The things that don't, and we've just done very simple markup, then what I'll do is implement this same concept into here, or the same design into here. So I just want you to kind of think about that as we move forward. Okay, so that's there. So those two things, and then so in your notes, as you're taking them, right, so in my notes right now, there's two other things I want you to put in your notes for this week 5, and there are two topics, and the first one is Valley Dev Fest. Okay, so Valley Dev Fest is put on, this is the 5th year I've been involved with it. Every year I'm on the leadership for the event, and it's October 22nd. We have a great lineup of speakers this year, some Valley superstars, some and if you're taking my 82 class, you may have already heard this. We have some folks from Google, which is awesome. We have some folks from around the Valley, some folks from around the state. We have some GDEs, Google Developer Experts, like Chris Espile, he's awesome. We have Todd McLeod, who's awesome. Introduction, I mean, you can just look. So just look through here and see what's happening. And this is down at Bitwise. And I will say the tickets are available now for purchase. and it's $25 until October 1st. And I know that may seem like, it is, but $25 for a whole day of conference plus a little bit of breakfast and some lunch. It's a pretty freaking awesome prize, right? Price, I think. So that's one thing. And just put in your markup, right? Valley Dev Fest. And if you want to, please go check out the site. Do. The other thing is that part of the schedule is a hacker space, or in this case we're calling it a maker space, but it's actually hosted by a new place in Fresno that is really awesome. So we actually have already, if you haven't heard of Fresno IdeaWorks, they're great. It's a maker space, and now we have a hacker space. So in your notes, root access is just down from City College, and it is a wonderful hacker space, a new thing for Fresno. Fresno's never had this. We have tech hubs, we have maker spaces, but we haven't had a hacker space. So check out root access. I know the folks who started this. I was at the grand opening on Saturday. I think there's a real opportunity to do some cool stuff here. So check it out. If you want to know more, let me know. If you want to just go check them out, you can see their hours when they're open 10 to 9 during the week, and then close on Sunday, different times. So anyway, those two things. Okay. All right, back here. So now that we have our new design, do that. Now let's actually talk about this item, right? Which is here. So this week we start the next series of JavaScript, the weird parts, and he gets more into a bit more code. So I want to show you how I want you to handle this, and I'll show you in forms of the way I did it. So on JavaScript, the weird parts, this one, let's go ahead and get rid of this and here, and I have it, oh, sorry, I'm going to close all. There we go. And then I'll just close this one. So this actually is different. So here is the HTML file for here, and then I want you to create a JavaScript. So notice this is, so I called it app18.js, and in here what I did is starting from the bottom, right, starting from the first concepts. Once he finished a concept, then I just commented out that code and continued. So for this series of lecture you'll have one JS file, and then what you want to do here is, so you'll do a combination of notes and code, right? So when you're looking at here, what I should see in the bottom of your file is a link after your to your app18.js file. Okay, so I want to see a combination of notes because there's some really great concepts, but then the code in this example. Okay, so that your normal workflow for that seems like everybody has gotten that, which is awesome. And that's cool. All right, so that's, I don't think there's anything else here, except there's just some really awesome concepts in this series of lectures from there. And then the last thing I want to do, so I've kind of moved around a little bit, so the last thing I want to do is actually kind of give you a little bit of primer, because I've already, as of today, and I'm recording this on the end of week 4, 3 of you have submitted the next item, or at least your feedback on the Develop It 1 and 2. And I got definitely one question I want to handle here. I'm trying to think if I want to handle it here or not, just because it's there's so much different content. So let's do this, okay? So in your notes now, right, so in your in your markdown file for here, I want a heading that says Develop It, right? So in here, Develop It. So you can see, and again, you can look at markdown cheat sheets to see this. On Develop It, I had a really great question I want to go over, right? And the first one was, after reading it, a little confused, and this is great because this is why I wanted you to read it. So when we talk about semantic markup, and that was one of my requirements, this is actually, because you're going to need to write, and so I'm glad this question came up. So you're going to actually need to, on the first Develop It, create your design, your HTML and CSS, right? So again, looking at the requirements. And let me just leave that there and come back into a new window here. When you scroll down and you look at, because we're moving into our last week in week 5 before our develop it, okay, and I had made these two at least available so you could check them out, right? So writing the user stories. But here was the question, right? So when I talk about semantic markup, here's what I mean. Matter of fact, a good example of this is actually in the autogram itself. When you look in the HTML, right, what we have here is you have a header, right? We have main, right, and then within each, so then here's all your main content. There are still a div, and often when we talk about semantic markup, we're using tags that still have the same function, block function, as far as divs go, but they semantically say what the content is. So when I talk about that, that's what I mean. I don't want to see divitis. It's not that you can't use divs, it's just that you need to use more correct semantic HTML. Okay, that's what that means. Okay, so the second question I got, so if hopefully that clears that up. And the second one was, so there was a confusion about similar to the autogram, or is there a way to written in it? Yeah, so it's actually not that you have to recreate the autogram. The autogram is a guide for you to understand, and that's really I think what he was looking at here was actually the next item, right? So the idea that under number 2, which is in week 7, when I talked about, let me see where this one was at. Oh, I guess I didn't specifically, yeah, it needs to be, okay, it needs to be done in the functional style, meaning create functions, not that, and really you can, if you just recreated the autogram with different pictures, that wouldn't be what I'm looking for. I want you to take what you've learned and then take it to a next step and create something that you envision that you want to create. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of functionality above what the autogram was, but it has to extend the concept of the autogram functionality, okay? That's what I'm saying. So it has to have event listeners. It has to have, and again, this is why I laid it out in this particular way. And it needs to be well documented. That was the other question. So and this is something I need to do, so it's good for me to have it in there because I need to do it as well, is when, especially in your especially in your JavaScript code, what you want to do is have comments. And I will do this because I need to do it in my own, for my kitty match, for my JavaScript. Oh, this is the old one, JS. I ended up creating a new here. So what I need to do is go through and at least document, right, each function, what it's doing, right? And it doesn't have to be long sentences, but documenting what your program does is important. That's what I mean by that. Okay? All right, so that's hopefully at least beginning to answer some of the questions, and it's good that's part of why I have you do at least have you do your first thoughts about the development, is so that you think through and make sure you understand before we get into that place. Okay, all right, so again, few things in your notes about that. Here's the last thing I'll say on this video. A question came across the chat that was great, and it really made me kind of think through some stuff. And so on this browser watch, so in your notes on your markdown file, on the browser sync, the thing, in order for it to watch for changes, okay, it's going to watch for changes in the directory you're running it from. So this happens to be my summer directory, and I'm running it right now in my summer directory, right? So any change I make only to this directory, the SU17, which is where I'm running it from, will be actually live reloaded. Now, it still will render the other pages, but it will only do a live reload under the place I'm running, the root from where I'm running it. Now, I call your repo the root, right? The start here for you, FA, right? CIT93 FA17. So when you're working on one of these directories and you want to do that live reload, then you can run your browser sync from that directory. Okay, so make that sure that you put that in your notes, right? So as an example, right now, if I was to bring up, let's just say my index file here, right? So here's my file that I was playing around with. And then if I said in here, right, let's say I made a change. What will happen here is because it's watching, it's reloading right now. Okay, so what happens is, and it was up in the title that I can already see it up in here, that's because that's where I'm running that from. And if I was working on like, let's say the learn subdirectory, right, and I wanted to look at that rendering, then that would be the directory I'd want to run my command from. Okay, so here's the other thing I want you to do is this command, whatever you're using for your browser sync, however you've gotten it to work, also have this, because sometimes depending on the work you've done in the command line, you may, it may take a while. Hopefully you've all learned about, the page up concept is using that page up. But if for some reason you've done a lot of commands and you don't see it, I also want you to put in your notes that actual, again, these are, but for this week, that command, so you have it, right? Just as an example, right? So under the heading, let's say you would have a heading here for browser sync, right? And then you would do the command itself, right? So that way, in case you ever needed to go back and find it, you would have that. And then put a few notes about when you're running this, that it will actually look at the directory you're running it from, so that especially when you're doing your own development in your own developed directory, you want to run browser sync from that location. All right, I know it's a lot, but it's good stuff, I think. So in here, when I look at your work, right, I want to see this design, I want to see your new notes file that I've covered in the video here, and of course the lecture. All right, thanks. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to do the code up, right? So actually what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to spend a little time today actually doing the last code up that we have before our develop. So I'm going to do it myself and create a video for that. All right, have a great one, and I'll talk to you soon.